it's a gift to racists that potentially Pakistani heritage men are raping white girls. It's like it's an absolute gift to them to say that's happening everywhere, and that there are grooming gangs running around the United Kingdom, and that we are all failing them, whether it's the previous administration or the current administration. If good people don't look at difficult issues, bad people will, and even worse people will then exploit them.
Joining us now is Baroness Louise Casey. She led the national audit on grooming gangs. You'll have heard a lot from her and of her in the last few hours and days. And Louise, I want to start, if we can. There's very formal language that goes on in something like this, maybe understandably, but the phrase that's used is group-based child sexual exploitation, which feels quite euphemistic when you read down into your report and to what you're actually saying went on. Can you spell out for us what these young girls, now women sometimes, were going through?
I mean, I think it's a really important place to start, and I will come to that, but I find it interesting in the world of crime that we often sanitise language, almost so that we protect ourselves from the true horror of what people do to each other. And so I think it just makes, in a way, it then makes the victim's experience of the criminal justice system actually worse, because at no point does somebody say, Louise, we are truly sorry that multiple men on multiple occasions, multiple times, rapes you. And if you think one rape for a human being is traumatising, imagine what multiple rapes are of men that deliberately set out to make you think that they loved you and that they were going to protect you, they were going to do a better job than your parents or your social workers or your care home. So they pray, they find our vulnerability as a state, they find these girls. Let's not pretend there are some boys, definitely, and there are other types of exploitation that have boys in it, but child sexual exploitation is largely girls, and they're young, and they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and essentially these men, they smell them, they find them, they seek them, and they rape them. And they don't just rape them, they torture them. So, and to do that to small people is like, you know, in the hierarchy of heinousness, it's right up there, really. And I think that we have to almost sanitise our language, because then people will say, oh, well, you know, that Louise Casey, you know, she's emotional, or that victim is getting too angry. And so we have to sort of close down all the horror of it so that we can just call it a crime and process it through our criminal justice system. And I think that might be okay for the criminal justice system. I don't think it is, but it's not okay for the human beings, and it's not okay for us as a society as well to hide away from our darkest side. I think it's always important as humanity to understand that there are dark sides. You seek them, you look at them, and you do something about them. And on the whole, we choose not to do that. Crime is a really interesting thing, and child abuse, sexual abuse, kind of violence of a sexual nature, things that are sexually driven, is, we don't like it, Emily. As a society, we want to think that it's other people, and so we sanitise everything.
And that might explain the other really important part of your report, and you use the word adultification, which is when we want to stop thinking of 10 and 11-year-olds, or even 13, 14, 15-year-olds as children, and we talk about the sex as if it was consensual, and or we use words like child prostitution instead of slavery or abuse or rape, because we try and pretend that it was something that on one level they wanted.
I mean, that's why I mean they've said yes to this, and I think they were a bit, why? And even at the beginning, you know, I've got people, it was like, getting a team to do this together in the speed that we have to, it was like a scene out of Ocean's 11. You know, there I was doing a ring round saying,
Nice.
"Are you busy? Have you got time? Sorry about retirement, mate. I need you." But in part because I needed people that understood what we were dealing with. So 2 out of the 3 people that had done this came with me to Rotherham. They were there 10 years ago with me, listening to the same testimony of the same sorts of victims. You know, people that worked with me on the Met Review, just so that we would not have to go through. Do you understand how bad it is? Like, we all knew what we were dealing with, and therefore we could go from there. I mean, I just think the other thing I've been thinking about over the years is it's like we kind of get our heads around child abuse of children, right? And we think that then means they're small kids. So I think as a society we have greater eyes on of small children. So, you know, you're normally born in a hospital, so you might see the mother before she, you know, has the baby. You might see her partner in and out of that moment. You might see then the health visitors will actually go to the house, so we actually see what's happening in the house. I call it the fridge test. You know, and then you go into at age 2, we normally do some sort of development thing, and then and then they go to junior school where there's one teacher to 30 kids, and it's the same teacher all day, so she or he gets much more sense of what's happening in these kids' lives. And of course, quite rightly, as they get older, so you push them into more independence, you give them the phones, but in a way we pull out from those kids, and therefore it's less hard to keep our eyes on them. And the girls and women I'm talking about in the report are those that actually haven't always had that start in life of a resilient, loving family. They've ended up, people say in care. Emily, they're in and out of care, and they're in multiple assessments. So we've got this sense, isn't it? Family fails, kid moves to our carer's estate, and it's like stable. It's not stable at all. It's quite the opposite. And then, you know, we were saying earlier, like, you'd think missing nowadays would be like a little ping on your phone. Casey's gone missing again. Oh, Louise has gone missing again. It's not. It doesn't, you know, I sadly don't have children myself, but I'm very, very close to an awful lot of children and young people, almost because I haven't got any, I have loads. So, and I can't get over how I've got half of them on Find a Friend, so they know where I am the whole time and know where they are the whole time. They're not even my own children, you know. And this happened in many other families where your kid went missing all night, you'd go bloody mental, wouldn't you? Whereas we don't go bloody mental when it's these kids. Who gets them? The predators. And so the other thing I've been thinking about over the years, sorry, this is therapy, I'll stop talking in a minute, but sexual offending is a different type of deviancy. Sorry, that's very old school language to use, I realise. But committing this type of child abuse is for sexual gratification and power. There's no drug, you know, they are feeding them drugs, they are using alcohol, they are giving them gifts, but the outcome is straightforward so that they can rape them. And it's different, therefore, to child criminal exploitation, whereas one fantastic cop in the Met said to me, thing is, Louise, you know, if we're going after drugs, if we're going after money, if we're going after knives, it's like, that's a lot easier than actually finding our way through this, because the dark side of humanity is pretty dark. And it kind of, we can get our heads around the fact criminals want to make money, they want to be big guys, you know, they want to run organised crime because they want to make money. And of course they do terrible things to kids on the side, but their primary motive is going to be your money, which is why we put drugs in kids and send them on county lines. We plug them with drugs. And then, you know, if you're stopped and searched, that might be something that you find. This type of crime is about deviancy and perverse sexuality, in my view, and that's quite hard to solve. Sorry, that's a very unsanitised way of talking about what we're talking about today.
What do you think? I mean, you were asked to do this. You've already said you were asked to do it by the Prime Minister. You were asked to do it at speed. What surprised you when you were and your team were doing the report, doing the research for the report, talking to people for the report? What, if anything, surprised you, either in terms of the content of what you were seeing or in particular the institutional response to the questions you were exploring?
What surprised us was the fact that I guess some of us left Rotherham a decade ago, just over a decade ago, and because there's been a lot of noise over the interceding decade, there's been reports, there's been prosecutions, there's been, we're going to get a grip of this. There's been prime ministerial roundtables. There's been, I mean, you both know this world very well. Government appears to be doing things. You think things are getting better, and then, when the call came through in January, I understood completely in the midst of all of that high-profile publicity. Oh no, should you or shouldn't you do a national inquiry? Whatever sparked it, I can't remember. Could have been a local case actually in Oldham or something. I can't remember now. And then there was the should you or shouldn't do your national. I thought to myself, I totally get why they need to get, they need somebody to have a look at what the facts are and get a grip of this before you make any moves. I got it, but I expected that to be the job. I didn't expect to write a 17-page timeline of all of the different reports, initiatives, and so on and announcements where sufficient grip hasn't been in place to then even collect the data
because
properly.
We were talking about this. I mean, we were
just can't
covering this on Newsnight, probably with you, a decade ago in the 2010s. And I went back and I saw the reports that were going. So, I mean, when you say, you took your team back to Rotherham because it was the team that had been with you the first time, you're pulling your hair out at this point, aren't you? You're thinking, why am I re-seeing stuff that I have already written about and talked about and warned about extensively?
So in some ways, like we went back to Rotherham, obviously I wasn't there to re-inspect it, but I was pleasantly surprised by the fact they appeared to have got a grip of things. And from a local perspective, when I first went there, they were spending more money on training their social workers to deal with Ofsted, the inspectorate, than they were on child sexual exploitation. So I was very pleased to see that all of those things had changed. And I felt that they had quite a strong partnership, to use the language. So, they had health and the police and others, and we went into a live meeting, they were so unhappy with me coming into the meeting, disturbing them, that I thought to myself, they don't really care who the hell I am. It was one of those, so I thought, fine, I'll just see what happens. So I was quite taken with the fact it may still be going on. I think people can't be ignore that, but I did feel they had more of a grip when we were there before, and they certainly weren't in denial about it, which is a big deal for me.
But when there are, for precisely that reason, and we're talking about, as Emily's saying, a very long time period here from some of these events, and there's been a lot of hand-wringing, and there's a lot of politicians who are talking about this today, calling for action, some of whom perhaps were in a position to do something about it. That is problematic, isn't it? It's problematic when we see politicians who are pretending as if this is something new, when in fact we have known much of this for a very, very long time.
I think that's why I've just done, just been at the Home Affairs Select Committee, and why I said to them, I said it last night, I've said it throughout, and obviously I've only been talking about this since about 4:30 yesterday afternoon, but honestly, that's why people ought to just be a little careful about casting stones and suddenly having sort of outrage, when actually we've known about this for at least a decade from Rotherham onwards, if not before. And, you look at the 2020, the one that slightly, at one point, I've gone back to it, I was carrying it around and I kept rereading it, thinking, how in God's name was the 2020 Home Office report? That nobody can say that's an excuse. It happened during COVID. It was published in 2020. The work had been done before, where that feels quite late. I remember I was in Rotherham in 2015, but 5 years later they do this seminal piece of work with a foreword by the then Home Secretary saying, we have a problem here, we've got to get a grip of it, we don't collect ethnicity data, we should collect it. Then they make a pronouncement that the problem is white in it, so it's the perpetrators are white perpetrators. And I was just thinking, it's bordering on irresponsible to make pronouncements when you don't have data, and that was 5 years ago. I'm now specifically talking about whether or not child sexual exploitation, when it's group based, or grooming gangs, are more likely to be Pakistani heritage or Asian heritage. And when you're dealing with something as sensitive as that, because let's face it, we're all white in this room right now, how does it feel to be an Asian person
Yeah.
walking around in the country right now with people thinking, are they having a go at me? I think you've got to be utterly responsible with data anyway, but specifically when it's around protected characteristics.
Well, and I know this is difficult, and I think it's really important to be precise about this. And I know that the data is imperfect. One of the conclusions of your report is that the data is imperfect and it needs to be much better. But at the centre of this, the politics of this, the political question, which is constantly prosecuted, we've even seen it be prosecuted this morning from Kemi Badenoch, is that there is a particular problem with Pakistani men and group-based child sexual exploitation.
Has Kemi Badenoch said that this morning?
Well, what I'm saying is that she has been out this morning holding a press conference saying that this has been ignored for political reasons for far too long, and that therefore this is a sort of, it's been part of a cover-up and so on. From what you can see, what does your report say empirically about how accurate that charge is? That there is a particular problem and that this problem is centred around Pakistani men?
So I would just urge enormous caution of the opposition leader making political football out of anything, which, sorry, that's quite a tough thing to say, but I just wish people wouldn't, because at the heart of it is the victims and then Pakistani heritage communities. The vast majority are law-abiding. So will you establish the facts? Yes, Prime Minister, I'll establish the facts. The facts are the preceding government did not do a good enough job to collect data to establish ethnicity. And then in recent times, people, the police, MPCC and others, every visit I went to, people would say the vast majority of people that commit child sexual exploitation in group-based are white. I would say, upon what basis have you made that? But, slide 1, slide 2, and I was like, And then you realise they're making that finding on the basis of 34% of completion of the data. You can't make that. So people are leaning into a finding that they wanted, which is what I saw in Rotherham, and at one level Tipexing out Pakistani on a children's service file, which was probably done in a well-meaning way because they'll be worried about sort of racism that flows from that, is actually a gift to racists. I mean, all of this is a gift to the racists. If good people don't look at difficult issues, bad people will, and even worse people will then exploit them. So, that's my general view of difficult things that I've been asked to look at in life, and this is neither the other. So we established that. And then I thought to myself, or we thought to ourselves, let's go and look at some of the large police forces where they have been, there are sufficient numbers of child sexual exploitation cases of a group-based nature for us to look at, can they collect ethnicity or not? And yes, they can. So that made me even more cross with the central aspects of this, because if you've got two very large police forces and then Operation Stovewood in South Yorkshire able to collect that data, why can't I have that data? Why, as a previous Home Secretary or a previous policing minister or the Minister for Equalities, dare I say it, why can't they look at that data and interrogate it if I just get on a train to West Yorkshire and find it?
But to be clear, does the data, such as we have, does it vindicate the idea that has been levelled for some years now, that there is a particular problem among Pakistani men or groups of Pakistani men with group-based child sexual exploitation?
There is enough in the audit of looking at these three areas and the disproportionality in these are fully accurate details to take you to a position of disproportionality. So let's do Greater Manchester for a minute, because I asked them to run two separate data sets for me. We've got live and historic child sexual exploitation, group-based, very accurate, multiple offenders, multiple victims. It is significantly disproportionately Asian and Pakistani heritage. I also asked them to run the data on all child abuse cases, live and historic, and it is proportionate to the population, i.e. it's largely white. So that tells you something, which I think is better to understand that than actually data that you can't have nationally. But it tells me two things. One, I could have it, and two, I know what's happening. Those three large data sets On top of that, we looked at 50 serious case reviews that had all been conducted because they were in the system with the NSPCC, which is who the government outsources it to, for child sexual exploitation. And again, I'm afraid there is disproportionality towards what is called Asian heritage in the suspects and perpetrators. And then, a different type of way, but it's something I'm conscious is what the public look at, is actually, and we actually found some white large cases, but some pretty awful ones actually, one in the West Midlands that's really grim. But we found, and I put it in the report, really far too many cases for you to say there's nothing to look at here. So my view is we cannot say that it is a disproportionality issue into the Asian and Pakistani community, full stop. We should say, and it is true to say, there is enough evidence to warrant further investigation and a good look at it. And that's where I'm at. So I think people need to be careful not to jump over. They need to stay with what is the truth and what the facts are. The next stage is mandatory collecting of that data. And I think it's time for us to have a deep dive into, are there any cultural or religious factors that might be driving it? Because if we don't find that out one way or the other, you'll continue to have communities impugned, which could be and probably is unfair.
Not least because you think it's fair to say that there are some political figures, and indeed some figures, some media organisations as well, some in the media, who only seem to care about child abuse when it's being carried out by a particular race and a particular type of person.
So my general point in life is, maybe I'm just getting old, but if government and policymakers don't look at what is difficult, whether it's the darkness of perpetrators of sex abuse or the really highly contentious issues of race, given that, I did the Met Review and look what I found there. If people that are good don't explore and look at those issues carefully and proportionately, then you end up in a situation where in Rotherham, week in, week out, and it feels almost pedestrian nowadays because social media wasn't the same at all then, the EDL were not only camping out, bizarrely, in South Yorkshire Police's car park, but every single week, week in, week out, they demonstrated, could you be a Muslim woman in a scarf walking through that town on that Saturday? No, you couldn't. So the problem with all of these things is we're in this bit of a vicious circle that because we don't establish the facts, everybody uses the facts to suit their own ends, and that's not a great place to be, not when it's got child abuse, particularly horrific types of offences, and potentially offenders of particular ethnicity and or religion that's attached to it. I guess the thing that's worrying me about all of this is I didn't expect it to be quite so, God, this is so naive actually, but quite so political. I thought that given people have been in power for a long time, you've got to be careful. I would say to some people locally who are thinking, maybe Labour authorities or others, don't cast too many stones because you might have been in power at a time when some of this was going on. I'd say to anybody that's been in a role in Westminster, don't cast too many stones because you might have been around when all of this was going on. And so let's just take it one step at a time. So I asked for a reset yesterday in terms of how we discuss this and sort it out. I don't appear to have achieved that so far.
But anyway. On that note, Louise, do you think an important part of this acceptance of responsibility is individuals facing punishment? I mean, facing castigation, losing their jobs or going to prison? I mean, is that... because this is based on what the victims want. Is that an important part of what they are asking for now?
So I think this is really, this is so interesting because nobody else has asked me about this, and we were talking about it, that I think there's a real, so we don't get the victims right first time round, so they're 13, 14 years of age, we sometimes arrest them, we don't listen to them, we see them as wayward girls, we certainly don't prosecute their perpetrators for rape, let's face it, that doesn't happen. And so they live with that for quite a long time. And by the time they get older, they realise what horrendousness has happened to them. And then we still don't bring their perpetrators to justice properly. And they're angry. And they should be angry, Emily. They should be. I mean, I know people find it hard to listen to victims in the system. That's partly why we, anaesthetise everything. We let them have a... Nowadays, I'm lucky that, in fact, it was Keir Starmer. I'm not, saying this just to be nice about him, but I think he was the DPP when we first got victim impact statements when I was the Victims Commissioner. The idea that a victim might actually say the impact it's had on them in their lives was like something out of... I used to call... that he hates this, they all hate it. And I still think it's the criminals' justice system. It's not the criminal justice system. The criminals' justice system operates so that we process criminals. Everything is weighted towards making sure we do that properly. And I agree with all of that. But sometimes it feels very out of kilter. So then you've got a load of people who've had an absolutely bloody awful time, to put it mildly. One rape is one, just any form of abuse of that kind, any sexual offending is particularly difficult to what it does to us as human beings. It's so beyond the realm of what's acceptable. We can get our heads around somebody getting drunk and beating each other up. We can get our heads around burglary. I can give people an awful lot of leeway if they're poor and they commit crime. I can. But none of us can give people leeway if they commit sexual crime. That's why even in your prisons, you've got your Rule 43s, because they have their own hierarchy in prisons about, paedophiles. We have our own hierarchy around this in society because we think it's a step too far. And even really nasty people will think, well, if you're a sexual offender, you're worse than I am. So I think it's sorry, I'm going all over the shop, but I think this stuff is just fascinating and challenging. And then what happens is they then think, well, why did my social worker let me down? Why did I go missing? The girl last night, Fiona, 143 times she went missing.
I mean, do you think social workers should be before the courts?
Not necessarily social workers, I don't. I mean, I think that there are ways of dealing with misconduct. Do I think that leaders... So in Rotherham, it was very clear to me that the leadership had to go. And we referred some to the National Crime Agency for misconduct in public office. I think leadership is the critical thing here. I think it's very hard to tell, Emily, if you're running a children's home and you haven't got enough social workers and you probably think you don't have enough money. And, children's services budgets were protected till about 2017, 2016. I was running Troubled Families then. And then you could see how even at that stage you could see the budgets for children's services start to be brought down. So I think you get into... The other thing I'm worrying about is the sense of social media and the sort of bloodletting. And so I worry that people that, there'll be panic today throughout statutory services in the country thinking, oh my God, they're coming for me. My family will be, and I wish I could stop that as well, if you see what I mean. So I want justice for victims. But I also think we've got to be careful not to think, most social workers don't get up in the morning wanting kids to be abused. So we've got to be careful about how we do all of these things.
Louise, you talked about the dangers of and the need to look at these things squarely in the eye. And do you think, therefore, in that vein, it was a mistake for the Prime Minister to invoke politicians jumping on a far-right bandwagon when this question first emerged at the start of the year before you were asked to take this on?
I think that just the thing is, I thought at the time, oh, God, why are they jumping on a bandwagon? I didn't use that expression myself, but I did think, can everybody get a grip here? Like, actually, what do we or do we not need a national inquiry? At the time, I thought probably not. And there are people that were nasty that are using this.
Political figures.
But political figures, right-wing figures, to go even further into it. It's a gift to racists that potentially Pakistani heritage men are raping white girls. It's like it's an absolute gift to them to say that's happening everywhere and that there are grooming gangs running around the United Kingdom and that we are all failing them, whether it's the previous administration or the current administration. And that's the problem with it. But what's really important is to look things, as you put it, in the eye and then deal with them. And I hope that's where we've got to. I mean,
there will be some people, Louise, who just think this has all basically been kicked off by Elon Musk waking up one early morning and dictating what happens in British politics. Because, as you say, a lot of people knew about this. This wasn't a new thing that happened in January. This has been going on for it feels like 15 years, right? And yet it was him kick-starting things with a tweet that led to the Prime Minister having to say, well, let's not jump on the right-wing bandwagon, which led to you being brought in, which led to him changing his mind. Is this British politics by Elon Musk?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I have to say that I myself was I thought, I've known about this for at least a decade because I went to Rotherham.
Yeah.
Did I think things would be how they were when we did the audit? No, I didn't. I genuinely didn't expect to find some of the things that I've found. I really thought that we would collect data better. I thought that we wouldn't have people quite so much in denial. I thought that the victims that were historic victims would have been dealt with by now. It's 10 years later. And so I was quite... Blimey, okay. So because you look at those 17 pages, you think lots of work is going on, don't you? And actually the problem is that lots of work, there is no grip and nobody has got a grip of it. The government now have got all the information they need to get a grip of it. And so I, said to the Home Affairs Select Committee, you should now hold, the government to account for at least implementing the 12 recommendations. I am really, really keen that the National Criminal Investigation gets a good hearing, because the politics appear to be in the National Inquiry, do you or don't you, I think we're missing the fact that they're going to change consent for us, which is a really big deal. So girls at 13, 14 and 15 will be treated as if they're 10, 11 or 12. And I think that's a massive deal in British sort of legal history. It feels like the right time, the right moment. I realise it's not just about CSE. It's about something much bigger, about what do we think children are and how do we protect children. France did it not that long ago, but I've been waiting for that one since Rotherham. And then I think the other thing I was surprised by is they haven't got a grip. And, you look at that timeline, you look at the national initiatives, you look at the reports and you think you haven't got a grip. And that surprised me.
There is
the issue didn't surprise me, but the lack of grip surprised me. Does that make sense?
So, Louise, when I don't know if you're aware of this, but on at the tail end of last week when this was announced, Kemi Badenoch sent a email to all Conservative supporters saying, "We won, exclamation mark, grooming gang inquiry announced." Now, given what you've said about the politicisation of this, what's your response to that?
Well, that's politics, isn't it? They call for things, and then when they get them, they have to say they've won. And if that's how she sees it, that's a matter for the leader of the opposition. That's politics, isn't it? I'm a crossbencher, and I'm very independent.
Do you think it's in good taste?
I wish that it was a different response to it. I don't know why I'm sitting on any bloody fences. I think yesterday in Parliament, and I only watched the beginning because I had to go off and do whatever it was to do with this report, I thought there was a moment when Yvette Cooper, and I didn't know what she was going to say, said something like, I think it was when Grant Shapps was the Home Secretary and he apologised for something to do with child abuse, and I was the opposition Home Secretary, and I stood up and said I join in that apology. So today I'm asking, and I thought, I wonder whether that could have happened and then said, you've got it all wrong. Do you see what I mean? There could have been a moment of an apology that then might have landed this in a way which is, let's all just calm down. I mean, you know, you guys work in a way more in politics than I do. I guess it's what they all feel they have to do the whole bloody time.
Well, Badenoch said today that apologies are cheap in politics and action is what's necessary.
Well, that's not true, is it? Apologies are really important, and not mealy-mouthed apologies, which a lot of politicians do. And I think it's because people think if I apologise, then I'm going to have somebody come after me in some way. You know, for the last decade, we've not done a good enough job by these girls, and we should all collectively hold ourselves responsible for that. And it's taken, you know, I don't want to be nice to journalists and to the media, but it has taken journalists and the media, people like Andrew Norfolk, to just keep going and keep going and keep going at it. And even Andrew, right at the beginning, was shunned by his own people because he wanted to blow this story wide open. He didn't expect to be the person that put this issue on the front page of the Times, but he bravely did. And I think if we didn't have journalism holding the feet to the fire, but I don't think that's the point of journalism. Once you've got it on the map and exposed the story, it's the rest of us that need to respond to it. You know, I don't feel proud of the fact that in the interceding decade, did I continue to follow through on what was happening in this issue sufficiently enough? No, I didn't. Am I sorry about that? Yeah, very, very much so. Do I think I'll let this go now? No, I won't. What can I say? I'll never let this go now.
Louise Casey, thank you. Thanks for coming in.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.